Brethren and friends, welcome to a episode of Voice of the Craft, the Masonic dialogue where we explore the meaning behind the symbols and the tools and lessons of the craft brought to you by the Fairmont chapter. I'm your host, companion Adrian Adipo, and today I'm joined by very excellent companion Donald Carducci for a conversation on the light we find in the craft through not through titles and ranks, but through reflection and experience. Welcome.
Pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have you. We'll begin with a few quick thoughts and a segment I'm calling First Light, and then we'll move into a tool and a story. And then we'll finish off with a deeper question in light and in wisdom. So, to start things off today, excellent companion Donald, we're going to do a little exercise called First Light. I'm going to name a Masonic tool. Sorry, actually, I'll name a Masonic moral idea. And Donald will share his first thoughts that come to mind or his first feelings that come to mind about this thing. No long essays here, just the first light that shines when you hear the word. All right?
hmm
Okay. The first one is the trowel.
Unity.
Interesting. Okay. What makes you think of unity when you think of the trowel?
Well, the trowel is usually a tool that's used to spread cement that binds uh, bricks and stones together. So I think of the trowel as a symbol of unity because, like the cement binds the bricks together, so does the trowel symbolically bind the brethren together
Mhm.
within a lodge
Have you
or within a
noticed that
community.
it tends to be one of the favorite tools of grandmasters?
In our jurisdictions, the trial, it's not a tool that's very commonly referred to. I know down to the south of us, our neighbors in the U.S., the trial is a tool of the third degree, um, and it tends to be very heavily referenced. But here we tend not to reference it very much in our jurisdiction and in our right that we practice, which is a shame in a sense. But for Freemasons who do research and look at different jurisdictions and different rights, they'll very quickly be exposed to the trial and what its symbolism is meant to represent.
Yeah, I can agree myself. I just really looked into it over the last year or two, and it made perfect sense how you described it and its ability to spread cement, and that being a unifying concept, especially right now in the craft, we have brethren who are sometimes leaving because they're quote unquote not satisfied. When you might have past masters who are still a dominant force in the lodge, even when they're the Tyler or not present in the lodge, which could overshadow the present master. When you have entered apprentices who sometimes have trouble finding their place in the lodge and getting those mentors, the trowel is a excellent tool and symbol in keeping everybody together and everybody being on the same level, which actually leads me to my second word I'm going to give you, harmony. Now, in your Blue Lodge, you're also in a lodge called Victory Through Harmony, which kind of also, I guess, would relate to the trial. There's a little bit of similarity there. What do you think of when you hear the word harmony in the craft?
Well, harmony is in my sense it's unity, and uh, and it's unity on multiple fronts. So unity in pursuit, unity in perspectives in terms of what the craft, uh, the purpose of Freemasonry is. That's why we say within a lodge, harmony is paramount. A lodge that does not have harmony will very quickly uh, dissolve. Um, and it's the responsibility of the leadership of the lodge, and in particular the worshipful master, to ensure that harmony prevails in every lodge. And this is not it's not an easy matter to do. In some cases, as you mentioned previously, there tends to be struggles within the lodge, particularly if a new worshipful master wants to bring a lodge in a particular direction and previous administrations or past masters don't necessarily agree with him. So one way to preserve the harmony is to get the consensus of the brethren of the lodge before introducing any change to a lodge. If all of the members of the lodge are behind you and are supporting the change, then it will more likely be to succeed and the harmony will be preserved within the lodge. But if you're trying to force a change within a lodge where the majority of the brethren are contrary to that change, then that's where you have disharmony, and that's when you are sure likely to fail in in your objective.
Mhm. Agreed. Next word I have for you is obligation. What thoughts or ideas does that bring up to for you?
For me, when I think of obligation, it's sort of commitment, duty. Um, when we are first in initial um, initialized into the fraternity, we are obligated to respect certain tenets, certain principles of the fraternity, and for that, for me, when I take my obligation seriously, I look at it as a commitment to those principles, to uphold those principles, and to perform the duties that uh, are inculcated in all of every new brother, every new Freemason that is initiated into the craft.
Mhm.
So for me, obligation is commitment and duty.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'd like to add to that observation. You've been really amazing with your obligations this year and many years. I know you don't like to take personal credit that much, but I have to give credit where credit is due. There's so many things that you've done in the craft over the last few years, and every year I would find out a new thing you did, and I could see that you take your obligations seriously. A lot of us that are listening that are in the craft, we're very familiar with the sincerity of our obligation when we take it. I won't repeat what's said there, but there's something that's very sincere about it. And it says that, of course, you're taking your obligation on the volume of the sacred law. We're taking it there. So our obligation is with the great architect of the universe. But also, we have an obligation to ourselves, I think, and an obligation to our conscience, where if we make a promise to ourselves and we make an obligation to ourselves and we don't keep it, that should weigh on our conscience that we have not kept that obligation. And so, what I've come to realize is the obligation is as serious as you take it. And as serious as you take it is as serious as you mean it. And a well taken obligation in any degree of the craft or chapter can encourage you and give you that last little hump, little boost of motivation to get over a challenge or finally push yourself to a new level. It's like it's a commitment, in other words, right? It's like you say to yourself, "Hey, I got the gym membership," but you haven't made a commitment to get the trainer. Without the commitment of the trainer, you're not going to really be putting your money down and going all the time. So I really feel like the obligations in each obligation that we take is a commitment to a certain virtue. And if we take that obligation very seriously, we can take it as an opportunity to really capitalize on that moment of change.
I fully agree.
Moving on into segment number two, we're going to call it a tool and a story.
Mhm.
So each time we're going to pick a working tool. Today, the tool that I've chosen to discuss is a 24-inch gauge. And for Donald to tell us what that tool means to him personally and where he's seen it come alive in lodge life and also in perhaps in his personal life, what lesson it offers.
So the 24-inch gauge actually is one of the tools that I personally think is one of the most important tools in Freemasonry. It's the tool that is first placed in the hands of an entered apprentice Freemason. That is the first tool that is placed in their hands, and it like the 24 inches of the gauge is meant to remind us of 24 parts or the 24 hours in a day, and to make sure that we proportion our day to different aspects of our lives, right? Different parts of our lives. So in the degree, it tells us that, you want to proportion your day to prayer, labor, refreshment, and sleep. It doesn't tell you how many hours to divide into each of those, and that's, I think, one of the issues some of the brethren have. They say, well, 24 hours, four, we're supposed to proportion it to four parts of our lives, so 8 hours each. No, not necessarily. As we know, we sometimes work more than than 8 hours,
Hmm.
and some sleep a lot less than 8 hours sometimes. So
Hmm.
what it's meant to tell you or remind you is that if you want to live a healthy life, you need to have balance in your life. So it tells us to avoid, you know, putting too much time within one aspect of our lives, whether it's our professional life, labor, and at the detriment of other parts of our lives, like our personal reflections, our sleep, or even the refreshment part of our lives. So we want to make sure that we want to equally allocate certain amount of time to the most important parts of our lives, whether they be our profession, our family, our personal and private avocations, and of course our own personal health. Right, we have to take care of ourselves, and that means getting the proper amount of sleep, exercise, and so forth. How does this particular tool impact me, or lessons from this tool impact my personal life? Well, it has constantly reminded me of maintaining that balance in our life. So I can sometimes get very much involved in Freemasonry, like you mentioned, at the detriment of other parts of my life. So I'll get involved in Freemasonry early on, and I would, spend less time with my family, less time on my health, and the 24-inch gauge reminds me of the importance of ensuring that I have that balance across the different parts of my life. So I now am more prudent in how I spend my time. I don't allocate all my time to Freemasonry. I allocate some time to Freemasonry, but I also know that there's other parts of my life that are important: my family, my profession, my health. So it's important to have that balance if you want to live a healthy, long life.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Um, I relate to what you're saying. If I can share a story with you, actually, I haven't told you this story yet. I think you might know a piece of it, but I haven't really shared it. And maybe this you can relate to this. So it's fall now. This summer, I had a bit of a health scare. It was a heart issue. So basically, I had just been grinding and hustling too hard. When I say hustling, I mean like there's a work culture kind of like in North America, and I'm sure it exists in places like Japan too, where you just work until you can't stop working. And I had worked really, really hard in some businesses and career stuff that I did. I had traveled around to like 35 cities in the world. I've been doing that for every year for many years. And eventually my body was like, nope, you're not doing that anymore. And I was like, what do you mean? I push hard. I use adrenaline. I just get through what needs to get done. If something needs to get done, I do it. And my body was like, nope. So what happened is my heart actually had a little bit of a high blood pressure issue, and I had to go to the hospital for it. CT scans, CAT scans, MRI, and ultrasound. And I also did a stress test on a treadmill. Lucky enough, my heart came back physically okay. But they said to me, hey, you can't live your life like that anymore. You have to actually like take moments to deregulate yourself. So every day now, twice a day, I gotta sit down, and I feel like a loser when I do it, but I gotta sit down with an ice pack, put my feet up on the wall, do a little bit of meditation, put on some soft music, and some lavender. And I absolutely hate doing it, but I must do it to deregulate. And I think for me, I really took this as a lesson of the 24-inch gauge, because it's like we said, it's time for prayer, labor, refreshment, things like this. I wasn't making any time for prayer and for recuperation. I was just go go go. And I spoke with Brother Right Excellent Right Excellent Brother, Right Worshipful Brother Eric Perlinger, and he said, you know, sleep and prayer are always the parts we're sacrificing. We're very rarely are we sacrificing work to get ahead. Usually we take like on credit from sleep or from prayer, and we think, I'll get to it later. And then we don't get to it later, and then we pay the consequence of it. So it's very genius how the 24-inch gauge reminds us to take that time to take that time off for ourselves, not just like a vacation every once in a while, but like to do it also daily. And it also reminds me of how in the chapter we're taught to receive our wages, and we're also taught to take time off for the Sabbath, which is the seventh working day, or the sixth day, the seventh hour, whichever it is. But we're told to take time off, and if we don't take those time off, then we become very ineffective at using our other tools to actually get work done. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, and if you've ever experienced something like that.
I fully agree with what you just said. We tend to sacrifice the things we take for granted, like our health, like our sleep, like our prayers, and our family in some extent as well, right? Because they're always there, they're always around us
Mm,
until they're not, and then we tend to look back and say, well, I wish I spent more time. So we want to make sure that we don't do that, and we spend our time appropriately, because when you pass from this world, your family mourns for you. I don't know if your work mourns for you,
hmm
right? They move on to the next person who's going to replace you. They may mourn for you for a short period, like it was great working with you, but your family is the one who carries that loss with them. So you need to make sure you find that balance in your life. Work is important, but it's not the most important thing in your life. One of the things that I've always lived by is I work to live, not live to work. Right? I work to get the means I need to live the life that I want. I don't, live to work 24 hours a day. My work is not my identity. It's what I do. It's not who I am.
hmm Thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that. That was very personal, and I'm sure everybody listening could relate to that in their own way. Okay, so our last and final segment here, we're going to close with is, I guess we'll call it light and wisdom. So it'll be a short reflection on one of the bigger questions that we all wrestle with. So for today, the question I have for you, the listener, and for Donald is, what is the difference between ritual knowledge and Masonic wisdom? I'll let Donald take the floor with that one.
So, I would say it's the difference between performing ritual. You can be very knowledgeable about ritual, so you know the words, the movements. You can perform the ceremonies to perfection. But the underlining significance of our ritual, what is it meant to impart? What is it meant to teach us? How is it meant to help us discover deeper, more meaningful truths about who we are, where we come from, and what our purpose is? That comes from doing significant study and research and reflection. And that is what will eventually lead you through to Masonic wisdom. So it's sort of the main thing. It's like saying you can know a piece of knowledge, right, intellectually, and wisdom is how to apply it properly. and that comes from experience, from reflection on that information, and not just simply intellectually knowing that information.
Mhm. One of the things you often say is, I'm gonna butcher the quote that you give us here, but you often say it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be your best. Is
Yeah,
that
but
right?
we don't strive for perfection. We strive for excellence,
Okay.
right? Perfection is something that in this world, in this plane of existence, is not something you can necessarily achieve. But we can achieve excellence. And excellence basically is doing the very best you can do at any moment in time. And it's not to say that you have to be perfect in every perfect 10 in everything you do. But if you get a 7, and that is the absolute best you could have done under those circumstances in that particular moment in time, then you've achieved excellence. And that's what we should all strive to do. Never perfection. Perfection is an illusion in this, again, in this world, but excellence is something we can definitely strive for.
Hmm. And it also sounds like you're making earlier you made a distinction of two different classes of ritual. You said there's one where the person comes in with rote memorization and they're able to do everything perfectly, which I've seen. There's a few gentlemen that have an amazing, almost like photographic linguistic memory. I'll never be like that. I know I'm not that person. I wish I was, but I have a little bit of a reading difficulty sometimes. Perhaps a brother could also be slightly dyslexic, right? So he might
Mhm.
not get that rote memorization perfect. And then it sounds like you also made a distinction between Masonic wisdom, which is when you've reflected on what you learned and you understand what you've learned. You understand the meaning of it. You understand why is it phrased a certain way. There's a certain part in a sentence and the wording doesn't really make sense. You gotta. Well, what I personally do is I'll then break open the dictionary and I'll say, what is that word? Like, for example, in chapter, I recently learned about Haggai, which is a very short part of the Bible. And I said, this Haggai guy or Zerubbabel, they're not mentioned very much. Let me go research them. Okay. Oh, he did this. Oh, okay. He did that. Oh, and I'm learning about the guy's history. Then I open up a YouTube channel. And now I'm watching the history of this guy and what he did. And then now when I'm saying the words make sense because I am saying it with the intention of what it's trying to communicate, not just getting stuck on the words and the memorization. So I hope in those experiences I'm able to absorb a little bit more of the intention and the meaning. And it still doesn't mean that my performance of it will be 100%, but I think I'll be a little bit closer to the original intention. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been in meetings where the ritual is word perfect, and there is actually there's a special I don't want to call it certification, but it's more of a recognition. I think it's called the silver matchbox. It's something that they offer in the UK, and in order to get that recognition, you have to have delivered the 3 degrees of Blue Lodge word perfect,
Wow.
right? And I look at this and I say, well, that's nice. It's great, but I mean, the objective should be to understand the underlying meaning of those degrees. If if you substitute a word, but you understand the underlying meaning of what that degree that particular piece of ritual is meant to communicate, and you are able to communicate that meaning to the candidate more effectively than if you kept the original word, which is very old English that the candidate may not understand, and you substitute it with a more modern word that is the equivalent and it is meant to communicate the underlying meaning. That is more important to me than being word perfect. Because being word perfect and the candidate not understanding what you're saying because the English is just too old for them to understand it properly is kind of defeating the purpose, because the purpose is you want to communicate to them the underlying meaning of a piece of ritual. You don't necessarily want to regurgitate word for word with the ritual, what is written in the book, because then you might as well just give the book to the candidate and say, read this, right? What is the difference between the candidate reading it or you verbalizing that text word for word? You want to make sure that when you're delivering ritual, it's not necessarily to be word perfect, your goal. That should be secondary or tertiary. The primary goal should be to communicate to the candidate the underlining meaning of that piece of ritual. What is it meant to instill in them to improve themselves to become better men? What lessons is it meant to impart? That's the goal of the ritual. That's the most important part of the ritual.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's why sometimes you're in lodges where they're reading ritual, and that kind of defeats the purpose because you cannot possibly communicate to a candidate the meaning within the ritual by just simply reading the ritual. It's akin to you have some lodges will do education, and a brother will step up and will take a paper from Walter Leslie Wimhurst, right? And we'll say, well, here's the paper from this great renowned Masonic author. He reads the paper, great, but where's your reflection on the paper? What's your thoughts on the paper?
hmm.
You kind of like lose interest very quickly because you could read that paper yourself and you can stop at certain parts of the paper that have meaning for you that you're not necessarily going to do in the lodge if they just read through the paper. So it's important that you try to put some meaning behind that ritual, or if you're reading a paper, you interpret that what does the author express in that paper. So you again, you're bringing out the meaning, the significance of his words. What is he trying to communicate to you, as opposed to just simply reading through it.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I mean, everything you're saying, of course, I think we're you're preaching to the choir when it comes to myself, but I think just people out there that may not fully understand or embrace it. We've often there's a way of kind of describing people in masonry and the craft in certain areas. One of the things that comes up sometimes is this idea of a lodge mason, and I'm not sure completely that I agree with it, but I think a lodge mason, people say, is somebody who's likes the rules and the rituals, and they like the format, kind of like being in the army, where you
Mhm.
have exact rules, exact regulations, exact formats and things you have to follow. But I think that person, who is a great brother and spends his time and does show up, I think there is a risk of that person, and maybe listening to this, you can identify maybe there's a risk of that person getting stuck in the rigma and in the dogma.
Mhm.
And if you get stuck in the dogma, you can become as Jesus said in the Bible, like the fallacy, like the Pharisees. You can become like the Pharisees. It is written that they could be overemphasized on the on the detail and not on the idea of it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think what Donald might be saying, and correct me if I'm wrong here, what you could be saying is this is not the army, guys. This is not the local YMCA. This is not even Toastmasters. We have all those social and public speaking aspects, but at the end of the day, we are it's an organization that has an esoteric meaning. And if we get lost on only the wording and exactly what is written in front of us, then we can lose some of that special spark or that esoteric magic that comes along with being there in the moment with the candidate, giving them an experience, having that experience be communicated to their subconscious, having everybody looking at what was said before in a certain way. And when we interpret what we're saying, when we're able to express that degree in a beautiful way because we understand it ourselves, I think everybody in the room observing it is able to look at it and say, "Wow, I never thought of it that way." For example, I think of worship brother Warren Sachs, who does one of the best first degree working tools, personally to me, that I've ever seen. And the reason why I say that is because not just because he's animated when he does it, and he's putting the tools in a candidate's hand, and he's doing it a certain way, and he's doing something in the air with it. It's not just because of that, it's because the words that he chooses to emphasize, because they mean certain things to him, that leaves a completely different impression on me than when I've heard the working tools of the first degree done by anybody else. And so I genuinely appreciate that, and I 100% agree with everything that you said. A very excellent companion, Donald, because that this really needs to be emphasized more, especially as I think less and less people are showing up to lodges and showing up to chapters. The membership is people are choosing to stay home and be entertained by TikTok or their TV or their Xbox or their PC. So if they have the option of hearing something that's rote memorization but it has no emotion to it, has no performance to it, versus staying home and being triggered by whatever's on Netflix, they may choose the Netflix if the meaning of what we're doing gets lost in its execution.
It's it's very important to understand because there's a lot of debates going on right now, especially with AI and with the virtualization. What can we do now? There's certain lodges that are arguing with, can we have a virtual lodge? Do we need to be in lodge to do a degree? Can we have a tiled virtual lodge where we can give a degree? And for that matter, can AI give the ritual to a candidate? Right? Because if you're just going to read the ritual, AI, you can do that, right? You can actually create an AI bot that can deliver ritual just from feeding the ritual into it. The problem with that is that the ritual, when it's communicated between the ritualist and the candidate, it's not just simply words that are being said or delivered. It's a connection at almost a spiritual level between the ritualist and the candidate. And it's at that level that the meaning of the ritual is being communicated. That AI cannot duplicate. That's something that needs the human element uh, to be properly communicated, properly delivered. And that's why these arguments of having these virtual lodges is not really something that I can see Freemasonry hopefully will not go in that direction, because if it did, it would not survive very long afterwards. Freemasonry has survived for over 300 years because of its ability to have a message to be communicated to brethren. That
Mhm.
being said, not all brethren are in Freemasonry for the same reason, as you know, right? There's some that are there just for the, like you said, they love the structure that Freemasonry provides, the ritual, the brotherhood, the camaraderie, the social aspect of it, the brotherly love. And then there's others that really love the part of helping the community through charitable fundraising and so forth, the relief part. There's very, very, very few brothers that ever make it to the third tenet, which is truth.
Mm.
That's what they are really looking to go after, because it's a very difficult um, tenet to tackle, because it requires that you look at yourself, and not many will really want to look at themselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and that lesson continues even after the worshipful master chair, even after somebody becomes a right worshipful. I'd say that lesson continues even more. It's a harder lesson to look at the truth, um, that we're all fellows in the craft.
So,
We're all fellows in the craft.
the highest degree they say you will ever have is Master Mason.
Mhm.
Um, Everything you need to know about Masonry, my personal opinion, you can learn in the first degree. The second and third degree are there to reiterate those lessons. And they're there because they allow us to, we're creatures of progression, right? And we learn best when when certain lessons are segregated into particular step approach, you know? It's similar to if you take martial arts as an example. We have all of these multicolored belts in martial arts, right?
Hmm.
In the past, there was no such thing. There was white and black. So there was no purple, blue, red, whatever belts you have there, right? That only was introduced because Western cultures had a difficulty understanding. They want to see progression. They want to see advancement. So they basically had to take the lessons and separate them into all these colored belts that they would normally do at the white belt. Because in order to have to see that progression and keep the students engaged. In Eastern schools, they still some have just the white belt and the black belt because their mentality is different. They don't need that progression. They know that, I'm just going to study, I'm going to learn, and then one day I'll have learned enough to be considered a master, but then my learning continues afterwards as well, right? You never stop learning.
Hmm.
But and the same thing in masonry, I think. It's like everything you need is in the first degree tracing board. If the others are there to reiterate those lessons that are in the first degree tracing board, they're all there. They're just there to reiterate those lessons for helping us better understand them as we progress.
Wonderful, wonderfully put. Donald, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us today. And also, the way you approach masonry is steady, it's genuine, down to earth, and it really shows what good leadership can be like for all of us in the craft. For those who would like to meet or chat with you, or get involved in different Masonic projects, how can they reach out to you for support or guidance?
I'm always available through my email. I'm also on WhatsApp and Facebook, but they can reach me by my email address, which is carduccidonald@gmail.com.
Great. And of course, definitely come visit us at Fairmont Chapter
Absolutely.
if you're
And I
here.
want to take an opportunity also, Companion Adrian, to thank you for the work you're doing with these podcasts in particular and in our chapter as well. You are definitely demonstrating all of the characters that and the you're definitely fulfilling your obligation as a Mason to bring further light to the brethren in this new format, which is innovative yet very well received by the brethren, and that's really refreshing to see.
Appreciate that. I had good teachers, and I just want to be useful and use all the tools available to us. We are builders. That's what we do. We build things, and so want to continue to build and with everything we have available. But I do appreciate that. And as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Keep your tools sharp, your minds open, and keep looking for the light in your everyday life. Thank you.